"You've reached your ceiling here, Robert." That's what Ethan said. Calm, measured, like he had practiced it. It was 9:12 a.m. on a Tuesday. Executive conference room. Glass walls. 11 people at the table. HR on the far side, typing without looking up. And just like that, 17 years of my life got reduced to one sentence. I didn't say anything at first. I just looked at him. Ethan Cole, 32, MBA, sharp suit, confident posture. The same man I had trained for 2 years, step by step, on every system that kept this company running. Now he was sitting at the head of the table. My chair was 2 seats down. "That's not a demotion," he continued, folding his hands like he was explaining something simple. "It's a realignment. We need you focused on support where your strengths are more consistent." Support. I built the entire logistics system he was now in charge of. Every process, every compliance layer, every vendor connection, it all ran through something I designed or fixed. And now I was support. I could feel the shift in the room. People stopped looking at me directly. One of the directors adjusted his pen 3 times without writing anything. Another one stared at the table like it suddenly had answers. HR didn't speak. They just kept typing. I glanced at the screen behind Ethan. My own work was up there, charts, metrics, projections I had built over years. But he was the one presenting them now. Using my words. "You'll still be involved," he added. "Just not at the leadership level." There it was. Not leadership. 17 years. Late nights. Missed weekends. Fixing problems before anyone even knew they existed. Keeping things stable when everything else was breaking. And now I wasn't leadership. I nodded once. Slow. Controlled. "Understood," I said. That's all I gave him. Because the truth was, I already knew something he didn't. Ethan understood the system on paper. He could talk about it, present it, break it into slides, and clean language for the board. But he didn't understand how it actually worked when things went wrong. He didn't know where the weak points were. He didn't know what I'd been holding together quietly for years. And more importantly, he didn't know what would happen if I stopped. The meeting moved on like nothing had happened. Budgets, forecasts, deadlines. I sat there listening, watching. For the first time in a long time, I didn't correct anything. Didn't step in. Didn't fill in the gaps. I just let him talk. At one point, he explained a process I had built. He got part of it wrong. Not completely wrong, but enough that I knew it would cause problems later. I said nothing. That was new for me. Usually I would fix it right there, quietly, without making anyone look bad. But not this time, because something in me had shifted. It wasn't anger. Not exactly. It was clarity. When the meeting ended, people stood up quickly. No one said much to me. A few small nods. Avoided eye contact. One person gave me a quick, "We'll catch up," but I knew they wouldn't. Ethan stayed seated for a second, organizing his papers like everything had gone exactly as planned. I stood up, straightened my jacket, and walked out without saying another word. Back at my desk, my access had already changed. Folders I used every day, restricted. Dashboards, read-only. Authority gone. I sat there for a long moment, staring at the screen. Then I leaned back in my chair. And for the first time in years, I stopped protecting the system. And I stopped protecting him. My name is Robert Mercer. I'm 48 years old. And I gave 17 years of my life to that company. Not just time. Everything. When I joined, the operation was barely holding together. Systems were outdated. Processes were patched together. Every department was working in its own way, and nothing connected cleanly. Things got delayed. Clients complained. Compliance issues kept showing up at the worst times. It was unstable. I didn't fix it all at once. That's not how it works. I fixed it piece by piece, one process at a time. I built a logistics system that could track shipments from start to finish, not just on paper, but in real time. I added layers so we could catch delays before they turned into failures. Then I worked on compliance. That part was messy. Rules changed often, and most people didn't fully understand them. I simplified it, built checks into the system so mistakes couldn't move forward without being flagged. Over time, things got smoother, predictable, reliable. People stopped noticing problems, not because they disappeared, but because I was solving them before they reached the surface. That became my role, not just building systems, but holding everything together. I did it while raising 2 kids. while paying a mortgage that didn't wait for bonuses or recognition, while showing up every day knowing that if I missed something, it wouldn't just be a mistake, it would be a chain reaction. But I never complained, because I believed something simple. If you do the work right, it speaks for itself. Then Ethan arrived. 2 years ago. Fresh MBA, strong resume, confident voice, the kind of person leadership notices quickly. They assigned him to me. Bring him up to speed, my director said. He's got leadership potential. So I did. I didn't hold anything back. I showed him how the system actually worked, not just the clean version, but the real one. The exceptions, the weak points, the shortcuts that kept things moving when everything else slowed down. I introduced him to vendors, explained which ones you could trust and which ones needed constant follow-up. I walked him through compliance rules in plain language, not just what they were, but why they mattered. I even helped him prepare for his first executive meeting, told him how to speak, when to stay quiet, when to push. At first, he listened. He asked good questions, took notes, paid attention. I thought I was building a successor, someone who could take over eventually, maybe let me step back a little after all those years. But slowly, things started to change. Small things at first. In meetings, he would repeat ideas I had shared with him earlier, but present them like they were his. Not directly stealing, just reshaping. Enough that people started associating those ideas with him. I noticed it. Of course I did. But I let it go, because I thought results mattered more than credit. Then he started getting more visibility, more meetings with leadership, more chances to present. And every time, he used pieces of what I had built, what I taught him. But my name came up less and less. Still, I didn't push back. 17 years teaches you patience. You think loyalty will balance things out. You think people will see who's really doing the work. But what I didn't realize back then was that visibility matters more than truth in rooms like that. And Ethan understood that much faster than I did. By the time I saw where it was heading, he wasn't learning anymore. He was positioning, and I was already behind. Looking back now, the takeover didn't happen in one moment. It happened in small, quiet steps, the kind most people don't notice until it's already done. At first, it was just meeting invites. I'd open my calendar and see gaps where I used to be included. Weekly operations reviews, vendor calls, strategy sessions. No one said I was removed. I just stopped being added. When I asked Ethan about it, he gave me a clean answer. Just try and streamline things, Robert. Too many voices can slow decisions. It sounded reasonable, so I let it go. Then the emails started changing. Threads I used to lead were now being handled by him. Responses sent before I even saw the question. Decisions made without the full context. Sometimes I'd find out about changes after they were already in motion. That was new. For years, nothing moved without passing through me first. Not because I demanded it, but because I understood how one change could affect 5 other things. Ethan didn't ignore that. He just worked around it. He created new reporting lines. Subtle ones. Team members who used to come directly to me now went through him. Not because they were told to, but because he positioned himself as the central point. Keep everything aligned, he would say, and slowly people adjusted. Not out of loyalty, out of convenience. I started hearing things secondhand. Small updates at first, then bigger ones. A vendor escalation I wasn't aware of. A process change that skipped a critical step. A client asking a question I hadn't prepared for. Each time, I stepped in and fixed it. Quietly, the way I always had. But something else had changed too. My access. One afternoon, I tried to pull a full system report I had built years ago. Access denied. I thought it was a glitch. So I checked another system. Limited permissions. That one stayed open. System update. Ethan told me later. We're tightening controls. Tightening controls. On the systems I designed. I nodded again. Same as in the meeting. But this time, something sat heavier in my chest. Because now I could see the pattern. This wasn't about efficiency. It was about control. I tried to raise it once. Carefully. In a one-on-one with HR present. I'm seeing changes that could create risk, I said. We're removing layers that were there for a reason. Ethan didn't argue. He smiled. Robert just used to the old structure, he said. We're evolving. That can feel uncomfortable. HR nodded. Change can be difficult, she added. And just like that, the concern became my problem. Not the system. Mine. I didn't push further, because I understood something in that moment. This wasn't a discussion anymore. It was a narrative. And in that narrative, I was the one falling behind. Still, I stayed. I kept doing the work, kept fixing what I could, because part of me still believed the truth would show itself. That eventually, someone would notice the cracks forming under the surface. But cracks don't make noise right away. They build slowly, silently, and by the time they're visible, it's usually too late. At the time, I thought I was being patient. Looking back now, I was just giving him time to take everything. After the meeting, everything changed. Not just on paper. In me. I walked back to my desk that morning and logged in like I always did. Same screen, same systems, but none of it felt the same. Access was reduced. Permissions limited. Decision rights gone. For the first time in years, I wasn't responsible for keeping things running. At least not officially. And that mattered more than people think. Because for 17 years, I didn't wait for permission to fix problems. If I saw something breaking, I stepped in. Didn't matter if it was my role or not. I fixed it because I knew what would happen if I didn't. But now I had a defined boundary. Support role. That's what they called it. So I stayed inside it. The first alert came around 11:40 a.m. A vendor delay flag. Not unusual, but the system had a known issue there, a timing gap that could cause a larger backlog if not adjusted manually. I had fixed that gap dozens of times before. Took 5 minutes. No one ever noticed. I stared at the alert. My cursor hovered over the access panel. Then I leaned back, closed the window. Not my role. That's what they wanted. So that's what I gave them. Throughout the day, more alerts came in. Small ones. A compliance check flagged as incomplete. A routing delay in one of the secondary channels. Nothing critical on its own. But together, I knew exactly where it was heading. I watched. Did nothing. Not out of anger. Out of alignment. Because for the first time, I was doing exactly what they said I should do. Support. Observe. Respond only when asked. By the second day, the cracks were easier to see. Teams started asking questions. Is this normal? Did something change in the process? I answered carefully. Within my scope. No more, no less. Looks like a timing issue, I said once. Probably needs review from leadership. That was the truth. Just not the full truth. Ethan made decisions quickly. That was his style. Adjustments. Shortcuts. Efficiency moves. But he didn't see what came after those decisions. The downstream effects. The pressure points. The things I used to absorb before they turn into real problems. I started documenting everything. Quietly. Dates. Times. Alerts. Missteps. Not for revenge. For clarity. Because I knew this would reach a point where questions would be asked. And when that happened, I wanted facts. By the end of the week, the system wasn't broken. Not yet. But it wasn't stable anymore. And that was the difference. Stability isn't what people see. It's what they don't see. It's the absence of problems. The silence of a system working the way it should. And that silence? I had been creating it for years. Now it was gone. And no one noticed yet. But they would. Soon. Because the system didn't change. The protection did. And without that, everything starts to show. The first real problem showed up on a Thursday morning. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just a delay. Shipment ID 7C 1142. A mid-level client. Not one of the big accounts, but steady. Reliable. The kind you don't want to lose because they notice patterns. The system flagged it as a timing issue. Same gap I had seen earlier in the week. Only this time, it wasn't corrected. So the delay moved forward. Then it stacked with another delay. And another. By the time someone escalated it, the shipment was already behind schedule by 14 hours. That's when the emails started. Operations asking questions. Client support looking for answers. Ethan stepped in quickly. I'm reviewing it, he wrote. Clean. Confident. But I could tell from the wording, he didn't know where to look. Because the system doesn't show you the root problem. It shows you the result. You have to know where to dig. That knowledge isn't written down anywhere. It's built over time. And I had it. I watched the thread grow. Message after message. More people added. More urgency in the tone. No one reached out to me directly. Not yet. So I stayed where I was. Support role. By midday, The client sent a follow-up. Polite, but direct. This is the third inconsistency we've seen this quarter. Can you confirm process stability? That line mattered, because clients don't complain about one issue. They complain when they see a pattern. And patterns don't come from one mistake. They come from a system starting to slip. Ethan responded quickly again. We're addressing it internally. No long-term risk. That wasn't true, but sounded right. That's the difference. By the afternoon, internal teams started escalating more issues. A compliance check that didn't clear properly. A routing conflict between two active shipments. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to create noise. Meetings were scheduled. Quick ones at first, then longer ones. I was invited to one. First time since the demotion. I joined quietly. Listened. Ethan was leading, explaining the situation in broad terms. Minor process adjustments, he said. We're optimizing. I recognize that word. Optimizing. It usually means something important got removed. Someone asked a direct question. Is this related to the system changes from last week? Ethan paused, just for a second, then nodded. Partially, but it's under control. I sat there, hands folded, saying nothing. Because technically it was under control, just not in the way he meant. The control had shifted from prevention to reaction. And reaction always comes late. After the damage starts. After the pattern forms. After clients begin to notice. Later that day, someone from senior leadership stopped by my desk. Not a formal meeting, just a quick conversation. Robert, he said, you've seen this system longer than anyone. Anything we should be aware of? There it was. The door. Slightly open. I looked at him. Measured my words. There are some dependencies that might not be fully visible, I said. Might be worth reviewing recent changes closely. He nodded. Got it. And that was it. No follow-up. No deeper question. Because from the outside, it still looked manageable. That's how these things work. They don't fail all at once. They weaken first, quietly, and they show signs. Small ones, easy to dismiss, until they're not. By the end of that week, the system was still running, but it wasn't smooth anymore. And more importantly, people had started to feel it. They just didn't understand it yet. But they would, very soon, because the next problem wouldn't be small. And this time, there would be no buffer left. The call came in at 6:35 a.m. on Monday. I wasn't even at my desk yet. My phone lit up with a meeting request marked urgent. Subject line, client escalation, executive review required. That kind of meeting only happens when something has already gone wrong. Badly. By the time I joined, the room was full. Senior leadership, legal, compliance, HR, and Ethan. He looked different, not polished, not in control, tense. The client was already on the call. One of our biggest accounts. Multi-million-dollar contract. The kind you don't recover easily if you lose. They didn't waste time. We have a compliance breach tied to your last 3 shipments, the client said. Documentation doesn't match regulatory requirements. This puts us at risk. Silence filled the room. That wasn't a delay. That wasn't a minor issue. That was exposure. Legal exposure. Ethan spoke first. We're reviewing the situation, he said. It appears to be an isolated issue. It wasn't. I knew it the second I heard the details, because I had built the safeguards that prevented exactly this kind of problem. And those safeguards have been adjusted, simplified, removed. The client pushed harder. We need a clear explanation. Immediately, Ethan hesitated, and that hesitation said everything. For the first time since he took over, he didn't have an answer. That's when someone turned to me. Robert, one of the executives said, can you walk us through what's happening? The room shifted. Same people, same table, but a different tone. I spoke calmly. No emotion, just facts. The compliance layer has multiple verification steps, I said. Recent changes reduced those checks. That creates a gap between documentation and actual shipment data. I kept it simple, clear, easy to follow, because complexity hides truth. Simplicity reveals it. Without those checks, I continued, errors can pass through without being flagged. Over time, that creates inconsistencies. That's what you're seeing now. No one interrupted. No one challenged it. Because it made sense. More importantly, because it matched what was happening. The client asked a direct question. Can this be fixed immediately? I paused for a second, then answered honestly. It can be stabilized, but full correction will take time. That word mattered. Time. Because time means cost, risk, exposure. The room went quiet again. But this time, it wasn't confusion. It was realization. People started connecting the dots. The system changes. The early warnings. The small failures. All leading here. Ethan didn't speak again. Not during that call. When it ended, no one moved right away. Then the questions started. Not to me. To him. Who approved the changes? Why were safeguards removed? Was this reviewed by compliance? Short answers. Uncertain ones. The confidence was gone. And in its place was accountability. For the first time since that meeting, I wasn't invisible. I wasn't support. I was the only person in the room who fully understood what had happened. And more importantly, what needed to happen next. But by then, the damage was already real. Contracts were at risk. Reputation was on the line. And the system everyone thought was stable had just shown its truth. Not because it failed, but because the person holding it together stepped back and let it speak for itself. Ethan came to my desk that afternoon. No calendar invite. No audience. No polished tone. Just him. For a second, he stood there without saying anything, like he wasn't sure how to start. That alone told me everything had changed. "Robert," he said finally, quieter than I'd ever heard him. "Do you have a minute?" I looked up from my screen. Of course. He pulled a chair over and sat down across from me. Not at an angle. Not in a position of control. Just across. "I need your help," he said. Straight to it. No framing. No corporate language. Just the truth. I didn't respond right away. I let the silence sit for a moment. Not to make him uncomfortable, but because I wanted to hear what came next. I didn't realize how much was tied into those layers, he continued. The checks, the dependencies. I thought we could simplify it. Simplify. That word again. I nodded slowly. "It's not about simplicity," I said. "It's about stability." He looked down for a second, then back at me. "I see that now." There was no defensiveness in his voice. No attempt to shift blame. Just realization. And maybe a little regret. "I need you to help stabilize this," he said. "At least short term, until we can rebuild it properly." I leaned back in my chair. For 2 years, I had given him everything he needed to understand that system. Not just how it worked, but why it worked. And now we were here. I could have said no. Walked away. Let it continue to break until someone higher up made a bigger decision. But that's not who I am. I don't let things fail when I know how to fix them. Not because of the company. Because of the people affected by it. The teams. The clients. The ones who had nothing to do with what happened. So I gave him a clear answer. "I'll help stabilize it," I said. "But we do it the right way." He nodded quickly. "Of course. And I'm not doing it from a support role," I added. "If I'm responsible, I need full access. Direct reporting. No filters." That part mattered, because I wasn't stepping back into the same position I had been pushed out of. I was setting terms. For the first time in a long time. Ethan didn't argue. "Agreed," he said. No hesitation. That told me how serious things had become. By the next morning, leadership reached out. Formal this time. They wanted me back in the room. Not as support, as the one leading the recovery. HR reopened my role classification. Access was restored. Permissions reactivated. The same systems that had been locked were now fully in my control again. But the tone was different. People listened more closely, asked clearer questions. Not because I demanded it, because they had seen what happened without it. Ethan stayed involved, but he wasn't leading anymore. Not in the same way. He sat in meetings quieter now, more careful, more aware. And every now and then, I would catch him watching how I handled things. The same way he used to when I was training him. Only this time, he understood what he had lost, and what it actually took to hold everything together. Stabilizing the system didn't happen overnight. It took weeks. Careful steps, layer by layer. We rebuilt the compliance checks first, restored the verification points that had been removed. Not all at once, but in a controlled way, so nothing else broke in the process. Then we worked through the backlog. Every delayed shipment, every flagged report, every inconsistency. It was slow, but it was clean. That part mattered more. Because fixing fast is easy. Fixing right takes discipline. Leadership stayed close during that time. more involved than they had been in years, asking questions they hadn't asked before. Not just what was happening, but why. And for the first time in a long time, those answers were being heard clearly. The client stayed. That was the biggest win. Not because we convinced them, but because we showed them the truth. We showed them what failed. And more importantly, how it was being fixed. Transparency builds trust faster than perfection ever will. Financially, the company took a hit. Penalties, delays, extra costs. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to be felt, enough to be remembered. Ethan was moved out of the role quietly. No announcement, no formal explanation, just a shift, a different department, a different title. From the outside, it looked like a normal transition. But inside, everyone understood. He didn't leave the company, but he wasn't leading that system anymore. And he knew why. As for me, I stayed, but not in the same way. My role was redefined, clearly, in writing. Authority restored. Direct reporting line established. No more layers between decisions and responsibility. That part wasn't negotiable, because I had already seen what happens when it is. People started treating me differently after that. More respect, more attention, but I didn't let it change how I worked. Because respect that comes after failure isn't the same as respect that's given before it. And I understood that clearly now. Looking back, the system never failed. Not really. It did exactly what it was designed to do. The failure came from removing the parts people didn't fully understand. The invisible parts. The ones that don't show up in reports or presentations. The ones that only exist because someone is paying attention. Holding things together quietly. For years, that someone was me. And the moment I stepped back, the truth became visible. Not because I exposed it, but because I stopped hiding it. That's the lesson they learned. Not about systems. Not about process. About value. Real value doesn't always look impressive. It doesn't always speak the loudest in meetings. But it's there, holding things steady. Until one day, it isn't. And by the time people realize what they lost, it's already cost them more than they expected.